mighty community in the U.S. Shout out to them. They hit 500,000 users this morning, so that's amazing for them. Yeah, they built Fridge because most of us have no clue what to do with their money, whether it's about how to start investing, how to build credit, or if you need to be paying for it. So Fridge gives you all the answers by anonymously sharing what your peers are doing and suggesting specific tools to help you get it. And then my name is Mariam. I am one of the co-founders of Forward, the other company organizing tonight. I've spent the last 5 years working with early career professionals, helping hundreds of people land their first jobs and internships, and figured out pretty quickly there's a lot of room for improvement in that area. And so Forward is a job matching platform designed to help better connect candidates to companies based on skills, interests, and work style. So we have a lot of free online job search resources as well, so be sure to check that out. So that is us. But I'm going to hand it over to Christina and Josh to introduce themselves. So Josh, I'll start with you. Do you mind doing your spiel, your intro, and what was your first job, like your first real job you consider?
Yeah, so my name is Josh. Alongside my brother, we run a business called The Credit Brothers. Our goal is to help people build, optimize, and leverage their credit to elevate their lifestyle. So whether it's start traveling the world for free, get their first house, start their business, and get access to money from the banks, anything and everything, that 3-digit number we focus on is help people understand something that's unfortunately not taught in schools. So with that said, as far as my first real job, I kind of thought about this and I go, technically my first real job was like I was a pizza delivery boy in high school, and I thought that one was really cool because I kind of got to learn about like cash and getting like tips and like kind of how I could kind of navigate actually getting money as like somebody who had no idea what to do with it. But technically, when I was in college, I got an internship and I worked for Pratt & Whitney, which is an aerospace company, and I was working on commercial jet engines. So I actually come from a background of electrical engineering. So I remember that was like my first like real paycheck, and that was really awesome.
Cool. What about you, Christina?
Hi, everybody. Christina Garvey. I am the Early Careers Recruiting Program Leader at Fastly, which is a small tech company, and well, not small, it's a global company, but it's a tech company. We're based in California, San Francisco. If you don't know what Fastly is the company that's the technology that powers like the best of the internet. So if you're streaming the Super Bowl, we're the ones that are making that happen safely and fast and secure behind the scenes. If you're shopping on Amazon, we make sure you're able to do that without any hiccups or issues. So pretty cool company. I get to hire all of our early talent. So I built and designed and implemented and launched our intern program. We're 2 years old now, and so it's definitely growing and elevating. Prior to Fastly, I was at Visa, and I was the head of North America University recruiting there. My first job, I was talking to like I was a hustler. Like I started working when I was like 12. Like, mowing yards, babysitting. Y'all need a waitress? I'll help you. But my first big girl job was with T-Mobile. I kind of grew up in my career with them in sales. So sales leadership, training managers, and retail sales associates to become managers. So I was kind of like their regional leader. And then I moved over from sales into HR, talent acquisition specifically. And I've been doing this a little over 10 years and I absolutely love what I get here.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I don't think we're going to
Yeah, let me see our big girl, big boy voices.
I think everyone can hear us okay. But let us know if you can. Okay, so Christina, I want to stick with you to start. So there is a lot of data and a lot of like real life stories probably people here have those similar stories of the fact that job searching is uniquely terrible and challenging right now. And I am curious from the other side as a recruiter, like what is your observation? Is that true? Is it particularly challenging? Like what is your perspective on what's happening in the market?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk from like a new grad perspective because I work with early talent majority of the time. And right now I feel like you may have one position and 5,000 applicants for one position, so you're having to be creative on how you land not only the interview but the job. And so it's definitely it's rough in those application streets right now. But in talking with students, I'm hearing, the fatigue rough. And from a recruiter's perspective, I mean, I see the applications coming in for, to put it in perspective, for 12 engineering intern positions in a role being posted for 30 days, I had 5,460 applications. And that's me reviewing all of them by myself. So I have to figure out a very strategic and meaningful way to give everyone the same attention, but lean heavily into our efforts first. So that's our referrals, that's our partnerships that we have with student-ran clubs and organizations, and then also national organizations that we invest time into. So they get kind of the first look. And after that, that's when I go into keyword searches, in diving into resumes to identify the ones that match what we're looking for in this program. So I see the resumes, I see them because I review them myself. I'm not AI. I don't use AI to review resumes, and some companies do. Looking at those two ways of reviewing a resume, if a human's reviewing it, a recruiter, you've got like 2 seconds to capture the attention of a recruiter. Like when I'm looking at it, I have to see what I need to see quickly, or I've got to move on. I've got to keep going. If it's AI, they're looking for very specific phrases, words, skills that align to the role or what the hiring team has told it to need. So that resume, when I think about that, that resume is just a tool that could land you an interview, but that's all it is. It could, based on who's reviewing it. Then you've got to go past that. Like what's going to land you the interview or the job, and that would be your network. Getting a referral, having an in-person conversation with someone at the company, making an impression on someone at the company, standing out differently. The network is key. That is critical.
Yeah. And like something you said at the beginning is so striking to me. 5,000 people applying for 12 jobs, like 12 slots, right? Were those always the numbers? Does it feel like in the last couple of years, you've been doing this for 10 years, like are you seeing numbers increase significantly?
Numbers are increasing.
Yeah.
And you have to think about Fastly is not as well known as a brand as like, our FANG companies. I'm in a network with university recruiting leaders all over the United States, and we talk about this. And the more well-known brands, well-recognized name brands, they see 100,000 applications. So it just depends on the company.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just so people kind of understand, so you talked about a little bit what happens on your side. So AI is not reading your resumes, it's not reading resumes, you're reading the resumes. You, it sounds like, are starting with the referrals or the network piece. Something that I found, and y'all were talking a little bit about this earlier, I've been doing this for 5 years, not as long, but I found that when you send LinkedIn DMs, whether it was for sales or finding a job or whatever, I was getting responses 5 years ago. I don't get any responses on LinkedIn now. So like, using your network referrals, but like getting a response is really hard right now. Like what advice do y'all have for people who are trying to break through the noise? This is for you too, Josh. Like I'm sure people are hitting you up all day long. You have to hit up people all day long. Like how do people stand out with so much noise and everyone trying to get referrals and stand out?
Yeah, so we were talking about this. So I create content professionally. So part of what we do is we focus on short form content. So how do we capture attention in 3 seconds and then get you to watch a 45-second video, right? It's called a hook. And I think this concept of hook, story, and then marketing-wise, it would be an offer at the end, but you don't have to have any offer. It could just be the hook in the story of the video. That same concept could be applied to, say, trying to find a job, is what is the way that you're going to get the attention if you're just kind of coming out of left field and there's no warm intro, right? So I think it's really important to try and differentiate what is your method of trying to get that attention. Are you just going to send an email on LinkedIn? Or are you going to create maybe a little video, like a 30-second video that you can pitch over with something that you can try and provide value, right? I think that word value is the one that sticks out to me, because companies that are looking to hire you, when I look to hire people, I want to understand what is the value you're going to bring to my business. And I don't always understand that through a resume, but if you can try and cite something specific. Like for example, if you scan our website and you're like, oh, I found this part of your website that you guys do this thing, but you kind of don't have it laid out correctly, so I created like a little demo of what it could look like instead, right? Like that's now showing me what you can do and how you can deliver value to our company. And now granted, we're a small business, you deal with much larger businesses, but I think the principles are the same, right? And I'm curious, you know, obviously in your line of work, you have to go through a lot of this, you know, hiring process, like how people have found ways to stand out when it comes to whether it's sending you a message, how it's curated, what the headline looks like really focusing on what is the 2-second glance that people are gonna have and what can you curate and what can you make them feel and understand in that 2 seconds. So then they can actually read through the rest of what you got, which I'm sure a lot of people in here have got degrees and qualifications that are great, but if nobody gets to it, then does it really matter in the context of what you're trying to do?
The content piece, I have an example from this past summer, you and I talked about it. I had a student, out of all of the 5,460 applications, he met me at an event. I went to San Francisco State University and I met with about 60 software engineers, aspiring software engineers. And he came up to me afterwards, shook my hand, he's like, I've waited an hour to get to talk to you and I just couldn't wait to talk to you, and I've been following you on LinkedIn, and I have such an affinity for Fastly and what y'all do, and we just had a really genuine conversation. He ended up, because of that, he went to that event, he showed up, he was in the room, he shook my hand, we had a genuine conversation. Because of that, when he sent me his application, he moved to the front and got reviewed first. Now it was up to him and his skills and his interview skills and all of that to get him to the offer, but he did something extra. He sent me a 30, 60, 90 plan. He created this whole plan. It had videos embedded. He had, I'm sure he used AI to create some of the content. But he sent that, and I shared that with the engineering team. It's like, no one has ever done this before. So he like definitely stood out of the 5,460 because he had 2 genuine touch points. Another example is, and I want to say, like, just showing up here, I just talked with students a few weeks ago, and they asked what is the main thing, and I was like, number one thing, you and I talked about this, is just showing up. Showing up, being in a room, meeting people that you wouldn't have met if you wouldn't have shown up, making those connections that may be very beneficial years down the road or next week. You just never know. So that was number one. But the next example was at Berkeley, another type of event. It's like an AMA. I brought some sandwiches, and the engineering team, when we talked about the work we do, and stood around and networked, and a student came up, shook my hand, also waited, and wanted to talk about the intern program and what we had done, and like, he had all these great things to say. I didn't remember his name because I was talking to so many people that night. I'm so bad at that too. I'm so bad. So bad.
Yeah.
Don't ever quote me on that. But, he ended up, because he was at that event, he applied and he made it through to the interview, but he landed that interview and the offer on his own. Again, nothing I did to push it through aside from him being at the event. And whenever I met with him via Zoom, when I was going over the offer, I was like, I met you at the Berkeley event. He was like, yes, and I'm getting an offer. He was like so excited. But because he showed up and he was at the event, he got pushed through the process. So just showing up, got him there. Not because I remembered his name and I was like, y'all have to give him an offer. Not that. He did the work himself. It was just he showed up.
And just to expand on that for a moment, I've gotten a local pizza delivery job. I've gotten an internship with a Fortune 500 company. I've gotten brand deals in my current line of work, literally just by showing up and creating a human connection. Like, it's all the same, even though it's applied in different areas. So I love that notion of getting in person with people is increasingly more important, especially as technology has made our lives easier to just click a button.
Yeah.
You know?
And there's so much technology. There's so many options for us to use and to tap into. The especially in the AI world right now.
Yeah.
We're still trying to figure out how to navigate that from a recruiting perspective. How many candidates are learning all the resources that are available now, and we're having to learn what resources are available to candidates so we can adapt and adjust and stay ahead of it. So there's just so much.
I want to throw one more example of like why showing up matters. So I'm going to shout out Skylar, who's in the back of the room. My sister, who's my co-founder, and I were throwing an event in Austin, and we were like, come for free coffee and free job search advice. And it was us trying to kind of build presence. And Skylar was maybe the only one who showed up to the first one.
There were two.
Yeah, no, there was two of them. But Skylar showed up to 2 events and was one of 2 people at each of those events.
I was unemployed.
Yeah, he was unemployed, and he was like, I'm unemployed, I might as well come. Also, if you're on unemployment, you have to show that you're like taking active steps to like find a job. So he's like, great, I'm gonna come to these events and just like hang out. And Skylar was talking about like the work that he does in videography and doing events in Austin. And so when we were planning this one, and the first team was like, who do you know in Austin that records things? I was like, I got someone, right? So like truly today, introducing yourself to us, introducing yourself to each other, you have no idea where it's gonna lead, so don't be shy. Y'all have done the hardest part, which is, as I said, showing up. So major props to y'all. So we talked about this a little bit, but I kind of want to talk about like landing your first paycheck. We talked about first jobs, first paychecks, the first time you someone handed you a check, deposited something in your account. Like, do you remember what that was like? Do you remember if you knew what to do with said money in your hand / bank account / pocket? Curious. Yeah.
I guess I'll start it off. So here's the thing. I knew what to do in theory, which was, because you can do 4 things with money, right? You can spend it, you can save it, you can invest it, or you can donate. It's just those 4 things. So I knew, I should probably not just spend all of it, but I did that anyways because I wanted to build a custom gaming PC. So I did that, built a badass machine, was able to play all my games and whatnot. So that's what I technically did with my first one. But that was kind of like my immediate reward of like, okay, I worked very hard to get this thing, and I knew I was gonna have this internship for 3 months. So I was like, I just want to give myself like an immediate gratification, and then for the next, I think it was like 6 or 7 paychecks, I was like, what do I want to do with it? And definitely spent a certain amount of that money for sure, but I did focus immediately on saving it. And this was a little trick that I did, and I don't know if y'all are going to be the same in this respect. If I go into like my bank account, which I use Chase, and I see a checking and a savings account, even though I have money in savings, I still see the money that's there. So if I have like 10,000 in savings and 1,000 in checking, I get a little like, ooh, well, maybe I could just move a little bit over and like buy this thing or whatever, because I see that it's there. So one thing that I did right away is I actually opened a second bank account with a totally different bank. It was actually SoFi. They were offering a good little intro bonus for an account opening at the time. And then I just started to do like a split paycheck, where most of the money that was coming in, like 60 or 70% of it, went into my checking account with Bank A, being Chase, and the other 30% just went into SoFi, and I almost like never saw it because it was not a part of my routine to log into it, and I just wanted to stockpile some money because I knew going back to college, like I was gonna not be making as much money. I probably was gonna, want to take a trip or something for spring break, the following year. Like I wanted to have a nest egg, and I knew I couldn't trust myself at the time to not spend the money.
Yeah.
So I remember for me, like that made a huge difference because at the end of the summer, I had whatever money I had at my checking, was spending it throughout the fall semester, ended up getting a job on campus in the interim, but by the time I got to the spring, like I was really low, and I needed to tap into it to actually literally take a spring break trip at the time. So that worked for me.
Yeah, I think the out of sight, out of mind thing is so helpful, and the self-awareness is really important. Understand like your own relationship to money, and everyone has a different relationship to money. I want to give a quick shout out. You just talked about savings accounts, so there are these red pamphlets all over. So Fridge partners with a bank called Zinlo, and the concept is really cool, where it's like if you spend $4.50 on a coffee and there's like 50 cents left over, they rounded up to that $5, there's 50 cents. It'll automatically deposit into your savings account, and then they'll match that 50 cents. So for the $4.50 you spend on your coffee, you'll save $1. So if you are interested in learning more, Logan in the corner in the red sweater can hook you up. They're doing a $35 referral to download it and check it out. So I just want to give a quick plug there. But as I was saying, I think first, before I go into this like more, esoteric question about money. What about you? Do you remember what you did with your first paycheck?
No. Probably. It was so long ago. We're not going to say how long ago. But it was a while back. My first like real paycheck, I remember needing that for the deposit on my apartment. It was me and my boyfriend, and I had to, the first real paycheck. All the hustling before that just got spent.
Yeah.
Where were you when I needed you back then?
Yeah. Open a second bank account.
I do that now. I do that
Oh,
now.
yeah?
I don't want to see it. If I see it, I'll like, oh,
I don't
I
know.
gotta put there.
I mean, I was probably annoying my older brothers in the basement, like as a 6-year-old or whatever. You needed me.
Yeah. I think, well, so sort of as we touched on it, taking some wild guesses here. I think something we sort of talked, right, like that you just touched on is the self-awareness piece, and everyone's relationship to money is really different. And I think money is also a deeply uncomfortable topic, and especially, growing up in Texas, it's not polite to talk about money. We don't talk about money down here. Why do you think that is the case, and how do you help people sort of break out of this concept that it's awkward to talk about money? Like, how do you normalize it, and why is it important to normalize it?
Christina, if you want to go first. I've been talking first.
I really wish, growing up that we had financial acumen, we had conversations about it. We didn't. I remember being told that the people that talk about money don't have it. The people that don't talk about it have it. And I was like, oh, so that's what we were taught growing up, like, do not talk about it. But we needed to learn about it. We needed to learn financial acumen. We needed to learn how to budget, how to save, how to invest. We were never taught that.
Yeah.
We weren't taught in school. We weren't taught at home. We just didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
So I wish I would have known.
Yeah. I'm going to circle back to that, but I'm curious, like, Josh, for you, how do you think about, especially your job is talking about money. Like, why is that the thing that you're like, this is the thing we need to talk about, and like, I want to talk about it a lot? And how have you gotten past the discomfort that people might feel in talking about money?
Yeah, it's a great question, and this is specific to me. So growing up, my father, entrepreneur as well, right, is currently still running his own business for 30 plus years. And we always had a unique relationship. We were always kind of more friends than like father, son. So we talked about everything from sex, drugs, rock and roll. He taught me how to roll the joint. He taught me how to understand tax deductions and tax credits, and as like a 12-year-old. Because I was so curious that I would ask questions. And I remember he gave me a check one time for $50,000. And he said, here you go. And I was like, what? And he's like, I wanna break down this $50,000 check that he had got, because he's an electrical contractor. And he's like, 30,000 goes to the employees over here, 25 grand's gotta go to the material, 10 grand's gotta go to the inspector. I'm like, whoa. You just said more cost than what this check has. And he's like, exactly. It's 50 grand, but it's not actually my money. It's already spent. And these were conversations that I was having at such a young age that he was open to having with me. So again, I say it's unique to me because I don't think that that's typical. But I was very curious, and I kind of got used to talking about money and finance and credit and all these things at a very young age, so that by the time I got to be 18 and money started to become a thing and credit was something I could build, I already was used to it. It wasn't a big deal for me to I remember being in high school talking about how much money I was making at my job. And people were like, whoa, why are you talking about this? And I'm like, what do you mean? It's just a subject that we talk about, right? So I think it's so important, because if you start to become comfortable with this concept around money and finance, it's going to serve you in so many different areas of your life, because every discipline affects every discipline. That's something that Jim Rohn talks about. He's the mentor of Tony Robbins, if you guys are familiar with him. And in this idea of money, if you learn how to speak to it, and you learn what triggers you, then it's going to help build better relationships, not just from a business perspective, but also personally as well. So a lot of what we do with our content is we dispel myths around credit, and we talk around this concept that sometimes people just don't even want to talk about at all, because they think credit is the worst. It's like the thing that's going to put you in debt and ruin your life. But it's really under the notion of not knowing. And if you don't know something and it's unknown, it's scary, right? We don't want to enter into the void. We want to be able to shine a light and see where we're going. So the earlier we're able to curate these conversations, and and being the person to start it, I think is super important. And, you know, again, for me, it was at a very young age. I was like 10 or 11 years old, but even if you're in your early 20s or late teens, like being able to just start having conversations, like I ask my friends all the time, what's your credit score? You know, seriously. And they're like, what? And I'm like, no, give me your phone. I want to check your experience.
Oh my God.
You know?
I just started sweating at the thought of you looking at mine.
Really?
Yeah, I did. It's right, because it feels like money is such a, as you said, like I think there's certainly like a cultural element to it, but it feels like such a personal reflection of how you live your life. And I think that's where people like feel very nervous opening themselves up to like the conversation, and sort of that's my immediate reaction is like, oh my God, is it going to be embarrassing? Is it going to be judging me at like how I'm managing my money? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of that gut feeling that I immediately have, and I imagine I'm not the only one. So that's, yeah, it's just interesting. That was my immediate feeling.
Yeah, and just to add on to that for a moment, like a lot of what we feel is kind of a projection. Like if somebody asks me about my credit score and I'm uncomfortable with that, like I might shield off or I might shy away from it because I don't want to seem dumb because I don't understand it. But unfortunately, if we look at like statistics for say marriages, like one of the number one reasons people get divorced is because of money. Like we can't just look at something and act like it's not there. Like if there's a big pink elephant right here, it's a freaking pink elephant. Like it's there whether we like it or not. We can't just act like it's
gonna come up eventually. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's I just kind of go with have the uncomfortable conversation first with yourself, and then you'll be able to have it with those around you. And if you do that earlier on than later, then it's going to become easier, and it's just going to become something that all the things that you've heard growing up, like you said, maybe the culture, you know, families in Texas or other cultures outside of the U.S. that are maybe just not used to it, right? It's a spot where in the U.S. it matters so much, and I think it just doesn't make sense to try and avoid it when it's gonna find its way in your life whether you like it or not.
No, I think that's completely true and it's completely fair. And like one practical implication of this, tied to our earlier conversation, is like salary transparency and understanding like when I'm negotiating my salary, like how do you identify the right salary? How do you advocate for yourself? I think a lot of the people I work with are like, I'm worried that if I negotiate my salary, I'm going to scare the employer away and they're going to take away my offer. And so I'm curious if you have advice for people who are trying to figure out like, what is the right number to come up with? How do I have a conversation in this power dynamic of I am looking for this job, I want to close the offer, and then the recruiter seemingly has all this power? Like, what advice do you have for people who are nervous about that conversation?
Well, there are rules and regulations and laws in place now that protect the candidate in the salary negotiation experience. I feel like historically it was in the recruiter's court, and they would use that as kind of a way to manipulate the salary that was offered. But now there are rules and regulations in place that protect the candidate's experience. So a recruiter cannot ask you what you're making. What are you currently making? They can't ask you that anymore. They can't force you to tell them what you're looking for. You can freely offer that, but I always recommend you, this is outside of early careers, because typically early career salaries are set. They're non-negotiable. They're already set in stone. But for lateral and professional roles, it's really good to ask what is the range and what you're looking for. What does that range mean at your company? So salary ranges typically are based on skill set, skill level, years of experience, and if you are highly skilled in this position, you may fall closer to the mid-range. So it's really good to understand what the ranges are at that company, because not every company is created equally when it comes to salary ranges or how they even craft an offer. There's also to take into consideration the total rewards, because it's not just the base salary. There's other pieces to take into consideration.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, I think this is important to name, because if you are uncomfortable talking about money, you are definitely going to feel uncomfortable going to a recruiter or a hiring manager and talking about the salary that you would potentially be making. So it is, these things really tie together. So
there's not a lot of transparency within companies either. So it's not considered cool to talk about how much you make, and a lot of companies say don't talk about what you make because there's not a lot of transparency.
yeah.
I'm sure there are some companies that are very transparent or pay the same for certain positions, but there's going to be a lot of nuances in the salaries.
Yeah, that's good to know. So let's say someone lands their first paycheck. Maybe someone here is going to be getting a job soon or has just started working. What, Josh, for you, someone lands their first paycheck, what do they do with it? What is your advice? Where do they start?
I mean, I would say start where I wound up, which is learning how to put your money in kind of a variety of places. And one thing I wish I did earlier, which I did it kind of early, but in my opinion it's not early enough, is invest. I think that there should be a portion of your money that you dedicate towards spending. I like this 50-30-20 rule. If anybody's familiar with that, where basically 50% goes to your needs, 30% goes to what you want, and then 20% in a way goes towards savings and kind of these other things. So I think if somebody's just now getting their first paycheck, instilling a foundation for how you're going to treat the small money that you might be making now, like maybe it's, a lower paying job and you're like, maybe someday I'll make that higher amount. If you treat the money that you make now in a certain way, 10, 20, 30 years from now, like as you continue to increase your skill set, make more money, then you're going to keep that same foundation rolling. So what I would practically recommend is get used to investing and get used to saving, because we're already used to spending. You don't need to get used to that part. But whether it's opening up another account, like I said, we've got a great one, on the table. You guys can scan the QR code and do that. Whether it's opening up an investing account, and just even if it's $10 a week, or something really small, it doesn't even matter the amount. It's about the principle, and it's about building the habit, right? Because there's the cue, routine, reward. That's literally what a habit is. So if the cue is you get a paycheck, and the routine is you spend it all at the bar or whatever, then what's your reward? Well, your reward is a short-term dopamine spike, But if we change what the routine is the cue is always going to remain the same. You get money. What is the routine that you're going to follow, and how can you adapt that even right now in your early stages of life in a way that's going to apply and have a much broader and bigger impact as you get older?
Yeah. I know someone I was chatting with out there was like, investing was the thing that was making them the most nervous. They're like, I don't know where to start. So you mentioned just like downloading a few tools to get you started. Like, what do you recommend to folks who are like, I'm going to start $10 a week, $10 a month?
Yeah.
Like, where do you point people?
So I personally use M1 Finance. They're a company that offers a variety of different accounts, retirement type accounts, regular general brokerage accounts. So I would start by creating an IRA. And the reason I say that is because it's tax advantage, it's something that's built for retirement. So investing is literally the concept of putting your money to work, in my opinion. So if you just take, say, $10 a week and put it into an IRA, then what you're doing is you're preparing your later self to thank your current self for doing it, number one. And then number two, as far as what to invest in, don't overthink it. Like, you don't need to start analyzing the markets and figure out what the financial statements of NVIDIA is and what AMD is going to do. You don't need to do any of that. Simplest thing, I swear to God, S&P 500 is the top 500 companies that exist in the U.S. stock market. You invest, you could put all of your money into the S&P 500, and basically what you're betting on is this, is the U.S. stock market over the long term, over decades, going to do well. Well, I'll tell you this, if the U.S. stock market doesn't do well in a 40-year period and you lose all of your money because you invested it in this, you probably have bigger things to worry about.
Yeah.
Because that just says a lot about the global economy at that point. So if you don't know what to invest in, just invest in everything, which is an ETF, an exchange-traded fund. Basically, it doesn't cost you any money to do it. Vanguard offers ETFs. So if you say open an account with M1 Finance, which is a brokerage, it's how you actually buy the stuff, then you can look up the S&P 500 ETF. A bunch of different places offer it. I personally use Vanguard. I want to say it's VOO, V-O-O. And you can just put your money in there. And even doing that is going to do way more for you than just stacking it in savings, which is not to say savings is bad, like that's something you should do. But putting your money in a place that has an opportunity to create a return that's going to outpace inflation, that's going to outpace all these things that are, unfortunately spiking and kind of ticking up over these last several years, you know, with respect to just putting your money in a savings account and letting it sit there, I don't think that's the best place to put your money. So again, if you're confused about investing, you're like, I don't understand it, then just putting it in the S&P 500 is going to do way better than just nothing.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What would you recommend the mix would be between a Roth and a high yield savings account?
Oh yeah, that's great. So if I think of the 50-30-20, right, my brain goes, I would, depending on necessarily what you're saving, because here's the other good thing about the Roth, is in a way it is a savings account. And this is something not a lot of people realize. Say you put $1,000 in savings, and then you also put $1,000 into your Roth IRA. And because the Roth IRA is an investment account, the value goes up, using these numbers, from $1,000 to $2,000. And you go, oh wow, like that's great. But now you need to buy something. And let's just say it costs like $1,500. And you're like, well, I only got $1,000 in savings. And I have this money invested in my Roth, but if I sell it, then like, am I going to get taxed or all these things? The money that you put into your Roth IRA, the principal amount, meaning that initial $1,000 that you put in there, even though it's grown to $2,000, you can take out that $1,000 tax-free with no penalty. So, in a way, savings with a high-yield savings account and a Roth IRA are kind of the same thing. It's just you can't take out more than what you put in. So, I would, again, this is my opinion, I would put more into a Roth than I would into my savings. And also, there's no cap on how much money you can save. There is a cap on how much money you can put into a Roth IRA. You can only put like $7,000 a year into a Roth IRA. So you can put $70,000 into a savings account. So my opinion is max out your Roth in the early part of the year, and then probably by the second half of the year, maybe even by like the fall time frame, you probably maxed out. Can't put any more money in there. And if you're like, well, I'm just going to put it into my savings account and then wait until the new year starts. That would be my personal approach.
That's good. That makes sense. And I'm curious, Christina, like you work with a lot of, 22, 23-year-olds. Are you getting any questions
Oh
about?
my gosh, yes.
Okay, I was gonna say like, does there seem to be an awareness of like, how does your match process work, like all that good
Yes,
stuff?
it's like deer in headlights. When you go through the onboarding process, so like, wait a minute, I do not know how to choose a benefit, or what is a 401k match? What is an RSU? So we started offering a financial acumen class. Like one of our engineers will host that for the intern cohort.
Amazing.
Yeah, they had no idea because you're not taught that
No
in
one teaches
school.
it. Yeah.
You're not taught anything about total rewards
Yeah.
or how to invest or, yeah, so we actually got into a conversation about the stock because, most companies will offer stock options, restrictive stock units, and so there was a huge debate on, and I don't know if you have any advice on it, I'm very curious.
Find out.
Whenever your RSUs are vested and you can cash out, do you cash out immediately or do you hold for the long game hoping that the stock goes up? So half of the cohort, we're going to sell immediately. And then the other half, but my mom and dad said you're supposed to hold on to it until the long game.
I mean, I think people hate this answer, but it depends, right? Like if the company is like SpaceX, probably would hold on to it.
Yeah.
Because they're doing a lot of great things. But if it's kind of a company that you don't feel like truly has a long-term value to it, then I mean, if you've got chips that you can pull off the table, that's always better than leaving with nothing. And I'm not too familiar with RSUs and really how that structure ends up playing out and what the tax implications would be as well if you were to sell it. But I would say it would, in theory, if I'm thinking about me in that position, if it's possible to partially sell, to give myself a little bit of a cash return right away, and then that way I can take that cash and then invest it into something else to then increase my diversification of my asset portfolio, that's something that I would consider doing.
That was the argument.
Really?
That's the argument that won. You're like, pull that out and you put it to where you can make some money.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's like, okay, now I can buy my own piece of real estate, right, and get into something that I'm not in at all. Like, I think that'd be a great option. Like, depending on the value of those, like, because there is a cost to entry to buy a piece of real estate, and that's a different asset class than a Roth IRA or putting money in the stock market. So I would say kind of, again, it depends because what someone's personal situation is, what they have done, what they haven't done. I would say not having all your eggs in one basket as like a broad piece of advice is just something that I've found to work out best. Like diversify, you know. Yeah.
I guess my last question for you, Josh, because we had to talk about the name Credit Brothers, right? So credit, let's name it. Like, why does building good credit matter? And like, what are 3 things, again, people can do today to start improving their credit? Especially, like me, you're sweating with the thought of credit.
Yeah.
My credit score is not bad, I just immediately panicked. But
yeah,
what advice would you have for those?
So why credit is important, and this is one of my favorite questions, is that whether or not we think it's fair, whether or not we agree with it or not, it is the most important 3-digit number of your entire life. It's going to gauge what you can drive, where you can live, potentially what job you can get. They actually check credit ratings for that. It's going to depend, it's going to play into what car insurance rate you pay. In 47 of the 50 states, credit ratings are used to help determine your insurance premiums. And yeah, I labeled all the things that are the non-obvious things, but of course, how you spend your money plays into it, whether or not you can get certain credit cards, especially if anybody's an aspiring entrepreneur. You know, how we help small business owners get access to money is through their personal credit. So we are judged by our credit score. It is both as restrictive as anything could possibly be, or it's also as door opening as anything could possibly be. Because at the end of the day, it's a 3-digit number that banks use to figure out if they trust you. So if it's low, they're not going to trust you, which means that they're not going to give you that loan that you want to buy your house, or that apartment complex isn't going to let you move in, right? Or they're going to require 3 times the security deposit, or that business that you want to start, well, good luck getting the capital for it. You know, you'll have to go crowdfund through Kickstarter, or ask family members, or bootstrap it with whatever money you have in your savings account. You know, and ultimately, I live by the mantra, and this comes from my old man as well, is that life is not determined by the money in your bank account, but one's ability to borrow. And here in the U.S., we have something that is unlike anywhere else in the entire world, which is the ability to borrow. So that's why it's important. And ultimately, here are the 3 things that I really thought about with this. And number 1, and I thought about it from the perspective of getting to really good credit and kind of working backwards. And the number 1 thing that keeps people from having really good credit is not starting. Number 1. So actually start building credit first and foremost. And yes, it can be super scary to go to get a credit card for the first time when you're like, holy crap, I'm going to mess this up. I don't know how this works. How do I make a payment? What app do I use? You've got to start. And trust me when I say you're not going to get a $10,000 credit card off the rip. It's going to be a $500 limit. There's only so much damage you could possibly do. And the one that I recommend practically, Discover It. The Discover It secured card is fantastic. Minimum is a $200 deposit. It's what's known as a secured card. So you actually take money and you put it in a savings account, and then it's locked up for 6 to 7 months. And then after you show that you can pay things on time, then you actually get that money back. And in a worst case scenario, you actually don't pay them back. They've got the money to pay off the debt because you've already secured it. That's why it's a secured card. It's not like a real credit card yet. It's kind of like your training wheels credit card. So highly recommend that is to start. The second thing, what was the second thing that I had down? So I said start. Second thing is be aggressive. What I mean by that is that you can have a really good credit score if you just have one credit card and you had that credit card for 10 years. You can have a really good credit score. But the problem is it's one account, which means that if anything happens to that one account, the balance goes up or you miss a payment, it's going to have such a crazy impact on your overall credit rating that, again, it's kind of like putting all your eggs in one basket. So the golden account number you want to reach over a period of time is 10 accounts. And I say be aggressive because over the first 2 to 3 years of building credit, you should be building towards getting 10 plus credit accounts. That's a combination between loans and credit cards. A lot of people don't realize this, but as you build early on, right, you're not going to have like the best credit. You're not going to have an 800 score in the first 2 years. You're going to be in the 600s. You're going to be in the very low 700s or whatever, maybe even the 500s in the very, very beginning. But if you build it aggressively over 2 to 3 years, get to those 10 accounts. Then the rest of the 30, 40 years after that, you're chilling. You don't have to continue to aggressively build, but you want to establish that foundation, because if you have 10 accounts and then you apply for a new one and you go from 10 to 11, there's a factor of your credit profile called average age of accounts. And it's an average, meaning that average is impacted based on the number of accounts you have and the additions that get added to it. So going from 10 to 11 doesn't impact an average as much as going from 1 to 2, right? So be aggressive, work to actually get a handful of accounts early on, so then that way they build and they grow together, right? So I already mentioned the Discover and Secured card as a potential first credit card, but go and get, I'm serious, 5 or 6 credit cards over a couple year period. Even if you're not spending money on all, you just want the accounts on your report, and having good limits on those accounts are going to be super helpful as well. And there's even credit building loans, right? There's a ton of companies out there like Credit Strong. You know, if you have no auto loan, no student loans, no anything, you can go get an account with Credit Strong that's going to build installment credit history, right? That's an additional credit account. It's going to add to that mix of credit, right? So you want to be aggressive with how you're building credit. Don't just get one thing and hang on to it for 5 years. It's not gonna be the best. And then the last one is a little acronym I love to say, and it's called KISS. Keep it stupid simple. Pay your stuff on time and figure out how you're going to do it. You know what I do? Because I love opening up accounts. I have a separate checking account. I kid you not. I have a separate checking account that I open that's separate from my main checking account, that I have money in there. And I've set up auto pay on all of my accounts that pull directly from that account if it needs to be used. So I go in and I make sure I pay all my stuff on time manually. But if I forget, and this is literally happening, it will pull from this checking account that has money in it. It always has money in it, and its sole purpose is to make minimum payments on my credit cards. That's its one purpose. So it's like a safeguard to make sure I pay my stuff on time. And then also, don't overspend. Seriously, the average American has over $6,000 of credit card debt, right? And it's only increasing, because it's only becoming more and more easy to spend our money on stuff. You know, TikTok Shop and the For You page. I mean, it's got me, right? It's got me 3 times. So I live by the 10% rule, right? I never spend more than 10% of my credit card's limit, which is why when people ask me, Josh, why would I need a $20,000 credit limit? Well, it's like, okay, well, are you going to spend $2 grand this month? And they go, well, between groceries and the gifts I need to buy for my niece and the trip we're taking to Mexico, yeah, I'll probably spend $2,000 this month. I'm like, that's why you need a $20,000 credit limit. And they're like, why? And it's because of this factor called credit usage, credit balances, which actually have 1/3 of your entire credit score is made up of how much debt you have on credit cards. The other 1/3 is payment history, and the last third is kind of a handful of other things. So if you spend 10% of your credit card's limit, I promise you won't get into that much trouble, because you're nowhere close to maxing it out. You're probably not going to get a credit card with a $100,000 limit, rack up 10 grand worth of debt. At most, you're probably dealing with 1 to 2 grand of debt, which is 1/3 of what the average American deals with. A lot more manageable and reasonable to work with. And again, it's all intuitive. That's why I said keep it stupid simple. Pay stuff on time, keep your balances low, be aggressive in building your credit, do it early on. Don't just stop at 1 or 2 or 3 accounts. Really work towards that 10 and get going. Actually start it.
That's an incredible summary, so thank you so much. Well, I want to open it up to questions. I know we've covered a lot of ground today, so just want to make sure we cover what's on people's minds before we wrap things up. Yeah, go ahead.
This is probably more for Christina, but I kind of want to go back to where you asked, or you talked about, for a new applicant, for someone in college right now, there's kind of 2 situations that, you know, I've been seeing, is that there's people who are like just graduated or about to graduate, and you don't have a job yet. And then there's folks that are like maybe sophomore year, and they're getting moved up there, and then like trying to start looking for a job pretty soon. You mentioned that you work with a lot of programs. Those programs, those referrals, those applicants that come through those programs get the first look. If I'm an applicant in my senior year, just graduated, you know, how can I still, you know, take advantage of that? And then if I was sophomore, how can I get like best prepared to be part of that as well, too, to give myself the best opportunity?
definitely getting involved in the student clubs and associations of the schools. So the number one thing is being active and involved and showing up, getting in front of the companies that are investing into those student run clubs and associations and or organizations nationally. Some specific that I work with are like college staff and code path and rewriting the code for women in engineering, a suite, so that's software, software women in engineering.
Some acronym.
Yeah. But there are, I feel like, especially in this climate, you have to do that. You have to be active and involved and make those connections. This will kind of tie into what you're asking too. So let's say your resume doesn't really have internships, but you want your resume to stand out to a recruiter and you want to get looked at, and you want either the recruiter or AI to get your resume. You have to highlight the work that you've done that is applicable to the work that you want to do. So your resume really has to tell a story, and it has to tell it quickly and effectively. So whether it's a recruiter reading it or AI reading it, it's going to get picked up. The story will get picked up. So if you haven't had an internship, your resume should really read out the impact projects, the work that you've done, whether it's solo work, classroom work, hackathon, whatever it is. It needs to tell that story. If you're internship heavy, then you start off with your internships and then you talk about your projects. But it's really about the story that your resume is telling.
And I would just add to that, I think a lot of people have the feeling that, oh, my resume should speak to every single thing I've ever done in my career so far. And that isn't the best way to play it. Because as she said, you've got 5 seconds with Christina, right? So if you're trying to list every single thing you've ever done, a lot of that might not be relevant to the job you're applying to. So putting yourself in the shoes of like, what skills, experience, story is most relevant to this particular job is super, super important. So like differentiating that relationship with your resume, I think is going to be really important. So
someone said, I don't know, it was a few weeks ago, they said, have your resume out and give it to a family member or a friend that doesn't do what you do, and have them describe to you what they think you do or what you did in that role or that project, and are you getting the right message across? So when someone that has nothing to do with what you do and they read it and they don't get it, the people you're trying to get it probably aren't going to get it either. So just, yeah.
But you can use AI for that. Like ChatGPT, you can actually upload the PDF of your resume, and then you can actually now have voice conversations with it. So you can practice with an AI if you want.
Yeah, I use ChatGPT is like my AI.
we love
Oh yeah,
ChatGPT.
yeah. I just that's why I have a nickname for him. I call him Chat.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's up, Chat? I want to talk to you about is red 40 bad for you? Whatever it is.
Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Alexis, and you guys mentioned tailoring your resumes, and I think for me, one of the things I'm noticing too is kind of like the ATS system and going through that and tailoring it that way. What do you think is the best way to go through it? Is it using the same keywords that you see on the application? Is it really just trying to focus on that storytelling aspect, especially if you have like this ATS system that is looking for those words? What do you think might be like the best way to break through that?
And ATS is applicant tracking system for
Yes.
people who don't know.
That's right.
The candidate tracking tool.
So some of the ATSs utilize AI to scan resumes, and they'll scan the resumes first and then put them through to the next step in the process, which is either the recruiter or the hiring manager. So if AI is reviewing the resume, they're scraping the resume for keywords that are specific to the role that you're applying to. Phrases, keywords. If the recruiter is looking, they're reading it from the top down. And so it has to be a marriage of the two. You have to have the keywords in the resume, and you also have the format in case a recruiter is looking at it. So when you look at the job, and don't use for some reason people are using like the clear .01 font.
So the white font, hiding the keywords. TikTok's gonna give you this advice, don't follow it.
Oh,
Don't
for real?
hide, people are hiding keywords in white font or like .01 font.
Yeah.
They think the AI is gonna catch it. But humans are looking
But
at
we
your
see
resume.
it.
They're
So-
gonna know. They're gonna figure it out.
And I see it all the time, because I do, as a recruiter, I do keyword searches. And whenever I put in my search string and the resumes pop up that match that search string, I'm like, but wait a minute, none of that's in the work that you've done. Like, why don't I see any of it? Because whenever we do a keyword search, it highlights what we are searching for on your resume. So if I don't see it and I look down, I'm like, oh, there it is. It's in that .01 clear font, white font.
Yes, don't.
Like, but where is it here? I need to find out what you did. That's like a trick that people will say to do, but it doesn't. It's not going to land you the job. No. It might get you into the search. It won't get you the job.
Well, this actually brings up another thought that Josh, I'm curious what your thoughts are here too. TikTok for advice on personal finances. TikTok on advice for getting.
So much.
I mean, people are throwing a lot of advice out there. Some of it is good. Some of it, like you are a content creator. What advice do you offer people who are like trying to make sense of who is a reliable source for personal finance advice and who is maybe not such a reliable source?
Yeah, it's very difficult to discern what's true and what's not. I mean, most recently the infinite banking hack. If y'all caught
my
this,
gosh.
where people were just pulling money. Yeah, you know. When people that are pulling money out of a Chase ATM and they're like, oh, I just made like $10,000 or whatever, because in reality, somebody made a TikTok video that was like, oh, infinite money glitch. You know, just take out more money than you actually have, or deposit a check so then your account is higher in balance, and then pull out the money even though the check is going to
It's not gonna
bounce.
clear.
So really what they're telling you to do is commit fraud.
Fraud.
Which is, by the way, yeah, huge fines, probably going to jail. So that's fun. That's really fun. So, I mean, number one, like, don't be dumb in the sense that if it sounds way too good to be true, like, especially with money, don't do it. Like, that one sounded way too good to be true, and yeah, it's literally illegal. So, number one, there's that. And then number two, I find that a lot of people that, I make content every day. And there's a lot of people I know that do the same. But if there's an account that just has like a viral video that pops off and it's like some dude in a truck with a big beard and he's like, yeah, just my crazy money hack, like, don't, you know, maybe don't trust that guy, you know, because
Full context of the account matters.
you know, if they have a lot of videos and that's clearly what their channel is about, then you can actually, you know, review it and then again process it and figure out if it does make sense or not. But if it's just like some crazy, weird, random viral video from a no-name account, just look at that with a grain of salt. It's not to say those are all not true. Like, I've seen some really good hacks. You know, I say hacks because it's more just like, you know, fun to say. But like, I've seen really good tricks and tips with building credit from non-professional content creator accounts that are really good. But I see a lot of them that are just not true. You know, and I think it's very difficult at times when you're not an expert in it. How do you discern what's true and what's not? So number one, this is where I think the network of people around you make a difference. Like, I don't know anything about cars. Nothing. That's why I drive an electric vehicle. Because things don't break. It's a lot less moving parts. But if I've got questions about cars that I like saw like a video online about something or another, I've got friends or people that I know that are experts in that. So I'll send a video to them and be like, hey, is that true? Like, is this thing valid or whatever? Like, leverage your network of people too. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and if you don't know people that are knowledgeable in that thing, it just kind of goes to show, like, you know, got to expand the network. You know, got to try and find people before you just blindly take advice.
Yeah.
There's so much content.
I was gonna say, what is this? So the hidden font is a really common one. Any other ones you'd recommend people stay away from? Trying to cheat the system because of TikTok advice.
There's this, so there's AI tools out there that will mass apply,
Yep.
and while they're great when used in the right way, when you're applying to a position that you need to really craft your resume to align with,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense for you to do mass apply.
Yeah.
You need to be very intentional on the applications and apply one at a time. So you can use those AI job scrapers to find the jobs for you, but don't allow the AI tool to apply automatically. Just let them find the jobs for you, because there are a lot of individuals that are using that just to, you know, quantity over quality, and it's not as effective as it could be.
I have a friend of mine, software engineer. A few years ago, he was trying to get freelance work off Upwork, and he was using AI and like a script that he had wrote to mass apply to freelance jobs. And he sent out, I think, like 500 applications for like freelance jobs, and he got none.
Yeah.
Literally, he got
Yeah, they weren't personalized. They
no.
weren't- yeah.
And it sounds like a robot. I think one of the things I would want people to take away from what Christina's saying is that there is a human on the other side of your job applications. Like, there might be technology involved to help manage part of the process, but apply to jobs assuming there's a human reviewing your application. So, with that, any final questions from the group? Yeah.
I often hesitate to cancel credit cards, and I have so many of them, and I'm like, oh my god, I haven't used this credit card in 2 years, and I'm like, is it gonna, deduct my points? So what do you guys all think?
Yeah, is Jamie Dimon going to come knocking at your door?
Right?
I know.
Like, how dare you?
For those that don't know, that's the CEO of Chase. Anyways, so canceling credit cards. Number one, if it's not charging you an annual fee, it's likely not worth it to cancel. So that's first and foremost. Number two, if it is charging you an annual fee, you likely can downgrade the credit card to a non-annual fee option, which, by the way, keeps the account exactly as it is on your report. So if it's a 10-year-old credit card and it's charging you an annual fee, you're like, I don't want this one anymore. You call up, you say, hey, I want to downgrade it. That 10-year-old account remains exactly as is. Nothing changes. The only difference is it's now a different product, which is the actual card that you use. So lastly, if it is charging you an annual fee or some other version of fees, because there's a lot of crappy credit cards out there, Credit One, First Premier, God, don't get me started, that charge you like weird fees, monthly fees, activation fee, all this nonsense. So if you are getting like nickel and dime and you're like, I really want to cancel this card, then as long as you have enough accounts around your report to make up for the cancellation of that card, then you're likely going to be fine. Which is why earlier when I was talking about being aggressive to build, that plays a huge factor, because if you just have 2 accounts and you cancel one of them, well, guess what? Now you just lost half your credit history. Because the account remains on your report, and this is a little technical, the account remains on your report, it's closed, but the activity is still there for 10 years. So technically you don't lose it, but it's kind of like sports, right? You're only as good as your last play. Aaron Rodgers throws an interception to lose the game against the Bills, we say he's a crappy quarterback. It doesn't matter about his entire career. Same thing with credit history. Like, banks care about what you're doing today. They care about what is going on as of right now, not what happened last year or 5 years ago. So I would recommend, if it's a card that's a sock drawer card is what I call them, meaning you never spend on it, it's just kind of there, just keep it. And honestly, buy a banana with it, or put Netflix subscription on it, like do something just to keep it active. You gotta spend money on it like once every 6 months. If you do that, the account's gonna remain active, and like I said, it's likely gonna be better for you to do something like that rather than just canceling it. As long as, again, you have enough accounts around it, maybe you can cancel it, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. It's awesome.
Amazing. Well, Josh and Christina, thank you so much. We've hit an hour, so be mindful of your time, but thank you so much for being here. We covered some very meaty topics, but I think hopefully people found it incredibly helpful. Reminder to find Logan if you want to check out the Zenlo bank account.
I get $35.
Yeah, $35 to do that. We'll hang back for a couple of minutes, but otherwise have a wonderful Wednesday night. We really appreciate y'all being here.
We're gonna hang out.
Thank you. Yeah, we can just hang right here while I put chairs away and stuff, so thank you.
Ah.
Still just cancel my cards and